Happy Friday, good morning. Was looking and seeing what would be good to go over this morning, and thought about getting real Samuel L. Jackson in the Old Testament. But anytime I think that, I always think about, well, what if God was Old Testament with you all the time, you know? So when we make instinctual decisions, it's always good to listen to our first impulse, our first instinct. A lot of times our instinct, is tied directly in with our conscience. We can sense a threat before it happens, or we kind of have the right first impression. When people show you who they are the first time, believe them, that kind of thing. But when it comes to reacting based off of other people's actions, it's always good to go with your second mind, not your first mind. Your first mind is going to be very emotional, and many people are sitting in confinement now because of emotional decisions they made in the moment. Myself included, you know what I mean? I knew the rules of my parents' home, of my community upbringing. It was conservatism squared. So white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Midwestern culture, conservatism, which is anti-loudness, anti-rhythm, anti-spirit, anti-sexuality, anti-kinesthetic intelligence, pure logic, pure reason. And then on top of that, the Eastern tradition of complete excessive piety and celibacy, and basically what Japanese car companies did to Ford in improving on that vehicle, Eastern conservatism did to white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture. So part of the reason that our communities are successful academically is we take the kind of Caucasian blueprint and then build upon it like a tower. So once you study calculus, you realize there's something called a limit. So that is a value that a line or a curve will approach, but it will never touch, right? So that line is perfection. And I had a mentor that took me on under his wing once, that his first advice to me was, do not chase perfection. And we're told in white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christianity that the only perfect example is Jesus. And he just so happens to look like Caesar Digiorno. None of the people in my community could match that standard physically or spiritually, if you catch my drift. So we recognize that perfection is not an attainable standard for us. And so when you have that and you're instructed to have spirituality as your deepest foundation, you have to apply that to every area of your life. So trying to approach the limit of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant purity as an Asian American is just as unattainable as trying to achieve spiritual perfection of Caesar Digiorno. And so I made the unfortunate sinful mistake of living my life that way. But that hypocrisy in me triggered both my family and my community, and of course the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant community as well. Because since they are, in fact, our supervisors when it comes to morality, you would think that they would be operating at the highest moral standard. But in fact, you have to look and see who pays them to enforce that moral standard. And it's the same people that brought the slaves over on the ships and who, graciously give us our spiritual texts from which we're about to read now. And so with that context in mind, I think it would be good to go to the, let's see where we are. This is Matthew chapter 12, and we're going to start with verse, you know what? Let's start at verse 38, okay? There's so much wealth even in stolen property. Isn't that interesting? So this is Matthew 12, verse 38, and we're going to go until the Lord tells us to stop. Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. And he answered and said unto them, An evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. Now I know interlude. I know we've heard of the Jonas brothers, who were professional virgins back in the day, you remember, like Tim Tebow. But Jonas is referring to the prophet Jonah. You remember Jonah in the belly of the whale? So sometimes in the older English, Jonas and Jonah are used interchangeably. So let's get back to the reading. We're at verse 40 now. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonas, and behold, a greater than Jonas is here. Jesus is speaking of himself, of course. Verse 42, the queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, a greater than Solomon is here. Once again, speaking about Jesus. When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none. Then he saith, I will return into my house from whence I came out. And when he is come, he findeth it empty, swept, and garnished. Then goeth he and taketh with himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be unto this wicked generation. While he yet talked to the people, behold, his mother and his brethren stood without, desiring to speak with him. Then one said unto him, Behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. But he answered and said unto him that told him, Who is my mother? And who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand towards his disciples and said, Behold, my mother and my brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. Jesus had to spend a lot of time in individual prayer to remain sinless while constantly confronting the scribes and Pharisees, which were the religious leaders of the time. Jesus was always cool with the the poor and the needy and the sick and the so-called common people, the people that were despised and rejected by society. All of them liked Jesus very much. The only people that didn't like Jesus were the religious leaders. When Muhammad Ali declined to be enlisted for the purposes of the Vietnam War, he lost the prime of his heavyweight boxing career. In the years where all men are in their physical prime. So we as a nation were robbed of possibly some of his best performances because of a decision that he made not to be an example in the wrong direction. He understood that if he represented the United States military in that way at that time, many young black boys would be forced to do the same thing by their overseers because he would be used as a precedent. So he sacrificed, I believe, 5 years of earnings in an already rigged sport for the sake of his people. And I believe he knew what that sacrifice meant at the beginning of his career. The decisions that we make with regards to how we earn a living affect not only us, but all those who look to us for a blueprint on how to live their life. We will be assessed by our actions rather than our preaching. So, it's better not to preach. You say what you want about Paul, but it's very, very well documented that he was a bivocational missionary. In America, when you hear the word bi, you think of bisexual, meaning having sex with women and men. But bi just means two. Vocation is a career. So bivocational means that you have a regular career that earns you an income, and you also place equal effort into your ministry. In this way, I have to give complete credit to my biological father. He took that responsibility very seriously. At times when he should have been compensated, he was not, nor did he request it. In that way, he honored the samurai code. But it took its toll on him and all of us. Which is why that role and that burden could not be carried for an extended amount of time. America likes to break down the heterosexual nuclear family through buck breaking. Jamaica has a very, very painful history with this. But in the Asian American communities, which are often referred to as model minority communities, we are buck broken in different ways. We were not bred for sexual supremacy, as the African American community was, or entertainment, rather. Our mandingos are of the mind. And sometimes of the spirit. In this way, life is a marathon. But some of us are gifted as sprinters to achieve a higher level of neurological output for a shorter duration of time. I believe this was my father's gift. So I do not discredit his ministry whatsoever. We talked about the wheat and the tares. In all of our hearts, the enemy does his work at night. The disciples asked Jesus, who sinned, this blind man or his parents? And Jesus said, neither. The glory of the Lord had to be shown this way. Behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. But he answered and said unto him that told him, who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand towards his disciples and said, behold, my mother and my brethren, for whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. There will be no sign that will be good enough for some people. Some people are committed to misunderstanding you. There is no standard of perfection or whiteness. Or even American citizenship that will be good enough for some people. This is not God's fault. Some of the best memories, I believe, Dallas had were when our entrepreneurs had access to the stimulus checks and PPP loans. I apologize for any discomfort this gives anybody down there. But what I've been trying to show is that when we have a fair shot, even with a little bit, we can do so much together. But it just goes to show that we've intentionally denied a fair shot. So today, to those of you that feel like you have been denied a fair shot, you are my brother and sister and mother. And I stretch forth my hand to you. And whatever good God sees in me, I hope He extends those blessings to you as well. If you can, forgive your father today, whether he was your biological sperm donor, a family member that did something unspeakable to you, a trusted coach or teacher, a barber, a pastor, a police officer, a school administrator. With great power comes great responsibility. Not everybody stewards it perfectly. But it's important to remember those missteps of others when you receive your position of authority. We all know what it's like to serve under a tyrant. So if at all possible, let's avoid that outcome in ourselves. We've come to the end of another work week. We made it. Finish the day out well. Enjoy your rest. And let's have a good weekend. Be blessed.